Welcome to Essential Ingredients, powered by Next Gen Purpose, hosted by me, Justine Reichman. Every Tuesday, we serve up thoughtful conversations with founders, sustainability leaders, and community organizers who share their stories and missions within the regenerative food sphere. It's all about boosting forward-thinking folks and brands working to make better for you and better for the planet food more accessible. Welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm your host, Justine. With me today is Alan Perlstein, who is the founder of California Cultured. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you, Justine. Glad to be here.
It's great to have a fellow New Yorker here. I always love to connect with people, regardless of where they're from, but it's fun when they're from New York and we can connect over food and culture and all those things. So I appreciate that. So, when I read about California Cultured, I was super excited, and it seems really innovative and fun. So I'd love for you to share with our guests, those that are watching or listening, exactly what it is before we get into your whole story and how you got there. But just what is California Cultured?
So California Cultured is a food tech company that is building a platform to mass produce chocolate and coffee from a specific type of plant technology called plant cell culture, where we can basically take a single cell of a bean and grow infinite amounts of either cocoa beans or coffee beans, starting from that original cell. And from there, we could put that into large tanks and produce large amounts of chocolate and coffee, so all originating from that single cell.
Wow. So I got to ask, how did you come up with this?
Well, that's a long story, but I guess in the truth of it, this started about a little bit over 20 years ago. I was an undergrad in New York, working in different labs, and one of the labs that I worked in was a small little lab in Bayshore, Long Island, that had a grant from NASA to explore a technology called cell cultured meat, and they were one of the first in the US to really pursue this, where they could actually take a cell or from a carp or from many other types of fish and to give it some sugar and nutrients, and they would be able to grow infinite amounts of fish cells, eventually culminating in like a fish bite or fish steak, all coming from a couple of fish cells. And this was sort of the beginning of this type of technology called cell cultured meat or cultured meat, which now has about 80 companies around the world pursuing different versions of this type of technology. And that was sort of the beginnings of it in the US. And I was very lucky and privileged to sort of stumble upon that. And after working in that for sort of 2 years, working on some really interesting technology, it really inspired me with the possibilities of growing infinite amounts of materials, foods, medicines, anything, all starting from a couple of cells. And that sort of technology and concept sort of stuck with me. From there, I worked in different labs in New York City, designing different drugs, pharmaceutical devices. And from there, I started my previous food tech company, originally called Miraculix, now called Oobly Foods, which also focused on another new food called a protein sweetener. And that was sort of my first big foray into this type of technology, where you could grow these new types of ingredients using biotechnology.
Wow. So what was your what's your initial background in?
Probably a mix of biotechnology, entrepreneurship, and developing probably different technologies in growing cells. So that's sort of where I worked in for quite a bit, and I developed lots of different ideas and technologies, and I loved sort of thinking about it and creating it and testing it, and that sort of in the lab was this great environment to test these crazy ideas I had.
And so going from being in the lab to being an entrepreneur and doing the business end of things, I mean, I heard you say you did entrepreneurship and all those things, but spending so much time in the lab, it's got to be different now. Also running a business and innovating and being able to take that experience and that research and what you're finding in the lab and build a business. Can you talk me through that a little?
Yeah, it's always about uh uh mixing both of them. When it comes with science, it's more about exploration and making sure you ask really good questions, and you don't necessarily want to predict where your data is going to end up. If not, it could sort of cloud your judgment. But when it comes with business, everything you want to do is sort of focus on that ending goal as well. So you could focus on the most important thing, which is returning the investment to those who gave you the capital to achieve the specific goal. So whereas we have to sort of explore an entrepreneur, figure out sort of what exists, what has to happen, but also come up with your target. And the trick is, how can you tie that exploration with a potential good return over time? And that's always the challenge, I think, of a scientist entrepreneur, of how to go from that exploratory type of thinking to more of concrete and targeted outcomes. And that's sort of the biggest transition I think I had to make.
And how do you feel now being, I mean, I imagine, I don't know, let me ask, are you still in the lab as much?
Definitely not as much. But it's very good that you could ask the right questions. Like, for instance, you need to understand what the rough protocols and processes are,
Mhm.
and to have a good understanding of if something goes wrong, how would you fix it, or who would you call in to fix it, or what's sort of the next important step to take, because there are like 10,000 steps
Right.
between coming in with this idea and bringing it to market and putting it in front of people on people's table. So figuring out every single one of those thousands of steps is also exploratory in itself.
So that, I mean, I would say that's an advantage for you, having had that experience, having had that education, and now taking that with you as the entrepreneur to be able to connect with those in the lab that are working with you to be able to execute on this and replicate and innovate. So
Yeah,
for those that are not watching and just listening, because they can't see you nodding your head, yes.
yes.
Um, you know, what is that? I know that I can see that that gives you an advantage. What do you think the biggest advantage is for you?
Uh the biggest one is to think really outside of the box. Uh I sort of was thinking about this problem for a very long time. How could you grow cells? How can you make them taste good? How can you make it inexpensive so you could actually have the most consumers have it, and not just turn this into a once in a while thing, but make this more common and affordable. So I guess the advantage is thinking about this for such a long time and coming up with a whole bunch of unique answers that can allow us to sort of tackle and get to our goals without necessarily needing to raise monster amounts of funding to do that. and it's finding shortcuts. It's being sometimes it's always one of the tricks is also being strategic versus being scrappy. And when you're working in the lab, many times you sort of might not have the newest or best equipment, and you have to make do with what you have. And that's also sort of the same line of when it comes with science and entrepreneurship and deep technology. We're trying to develop sort of the processes that were never scaled or done this way before. So we first start very, very scrappy, like we would in the lab. But as we grow and develop, we become more strategic. And that's sort of the line and pieces which I've also taken from my research career.
I think that's, eloquently said and words of wisdom, because we all believe we need to be scrappy, but at some point you got to turn your scrappiness and interject your strategy so that you can grow and evolve and become what you want, that, whatever that is.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
scrappy is
exactly.
definitely important in the beginning, but there is a fine line. At some point, you really do need to start to strategize. And I think
Yes.
that was really well said. I'm very
Yeah.
curious. I'm very curious about, so what else can we look for in what you guys are bringing out there from cells?
Yeah. So our focus right now is basically cocoa ingredients
Mhm.
and coffee ingredients. We're able to basically produce cocoa powder, cocoa butter, and one of the most interesting things that we've discovered is we're able to produce a large amount of probably the most expensive part of the cocoa bean. These are a group of compounds called cocoa flavanols. So, for instance, when people are looking to have dark chocolate, they've usually heard that dark chocolate is healthier than milk chocolate, and the underlying reason why are these compounds called cocoa flavanols. They usually range in like 1 to 3% naturally in cocoa, and they've been shown to have a lot of amazing health benefits. For instance, the largest clinical trial ever on these cocoa flavanols was published last year, and they showed that a daily consumption of around 500 milligrams can reduce the risk of multiple cardiovascular illnesses and events by over 30%. That ranges from heart disease, stroke, AFib, and heart attack by roughly 30%. So just having about 500 milligrams of these supplements can have a massive impact on people's heart health. And now that we're seeing still that COVID is still very present and evolving with even greater amounts of air pollution and stress, and as well as still people are having bad diets, heart disease is still the number one killer of all people around the world. So sort of our secret and deeper technology is imagine that we could put in tons of flavanols secretly in milk chocolate, dark chocolate, dozens of different types of chocolates. So we can make almost every single type of chocolate a lot more healthy, technically, without even people noticing flavor change or price change or anything. And that's sort of our big
That's
vision,
quite a goal. That is a
yeah, of
great
how we could
goal.
actually make chocolate. One of the other deeper things that we're able to sort of change within ourselves is, unfortunately, cocoa in itself is a bioaccumulator in nature. They basically suck up large amounts of lead and cadmium from the surrounding soil. So it's roughly about roughly about 3 ounces of chocolate from many of the most major chocolate distributors have a really disturbing amount of lead inside of them. And has always been a problem, but this problem has actually been getting worse and worse. over time for many reasons. And this has led to sort of the creep of lead in chocolate over the last 30 years.
Wow.
So we're trying to basically have a chocolate that's completely free of lead, high in these healthy flavanols, and we're able to play around with the flavors and the technology, so we could even technically make it lower sugar and healthier for you on the most decadently tasting chocolate ever. So what we're trying to do is sort of sneakily make chocolate better for you while at the same time make it taste better.
What, it's a dream. I
It,
mean,
it
who doesn't
truly
want help? I
is.
mean, everybody, I mean, not everybody, but my dad loves chocolate. And I love dark chocolate. And, you try to eat a little bit of it, not too much, but if it had health benefits and it had all those additional things, and you're getting a treat, it seems like the perfect combination. And I really admire your innovation to build this business, to not only create it from a cell that has an impact in of itself, to building a better for you business, a good for you even business that makes chocolate and coffee and takes the best of all these things and tries to replicate them so that people have access to something that could be good for them and even support their systems, let's just say, if that's a fair statement.
It definitely is. And while trying to make this affordable and scaled up, that's also an important thing that I think like the three main factors, it's taste and price and availability. So our focus is basically scaling up now, going from lab bench to industrial production. And that's sort of the process which we're in right now.
Okay, well, you're going to have to keep us posted because I know everyone's going to want to try these products. And we're going to have to let everybody know how they can do that, when they can do that, and, follow your journey because it's very exciting. And it seems like it's going to change the future of chocolate in so many different ways. It's going to increase standards. It's going to increase people's need for transparency. It's going to increase what people expect should be in chocolate and in other treats, in my mind. Because if I could go get yours and it's doing all these things for me, I'm going to then want other brands. So I think it's really inspiring. And I think it's going to inspire others to do good as well and to, build us other products. So
Thank
I
you,
appreciate you
Justine.
sharing
Yeah,
that.
this is always part of my guiding principles. Make sure things taste amazing, make sure it's affordable, and if you could accomplish those things, sort of make it even more healthy. And that was always the guiding principle of building my previous company and this company as well.
Well, we're going to have to catch up again because there's a lot to discuss here and there's so much material. So I'd love to have you back on sometime. And in the meantime, if people want to learn more, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. Please visit us at caculture.com and follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.
Perfect. Awesome. It was so nice to meet you. And I can't wait to try the products and follow your journey as it evolves and see what else you can come up with.
Thank you so much, Justine.
Thanks for digging in. To learn more about these stories, you can access the show notes at nextgenpurpose.com/podcast. If you like what you just heard, head to Apple Podcasts or wherever you do your listening to hit subscribe and leave us a review. To join the conversation, follow us on Instagram at essential.ingredients and check out our weekly newsletter for your dose of food industry info. Visit the Next Gen Purpose YouTube channel for videocasts of each episode and give this episode a like while you're there. You can also connect with me directly at justine.reichman on Instagram and The Real Justine Reichman on TikTok. See you next week.